2 years ago, something very unusual happened. The voters of Oregon returned a former governor to office after a hiatus of several years. Perhaps even more unusual, that former governor was actually willing to come back and take on the challenges that this state offers. Our economy was performing very badly. We faced a severe shortfall in public revenues compared with committed program costs. Medicaid and corrections spending were squeezing out dollars that would otherwise have gone to education, especially higher education. In the face of those challenges, the returning governor declared that it was time to rebuild Oregon's house. In a deeply divided nation and a deeply divided state, he also set the tone for how we must work together. And I quote, "Somewhere in America, a state needs to be able to demonstrate that we can weather this kind of challenge without losing our sense of community, without losing our commitment to one another, and emerge stronger and more united than where we began. Let's make that our state. Let's make that state Oregon." Thanks to a string of accomplishments and a return to bipartisan cooperation on healthcare, education, jobs, and more, I think it's fair to say that the rest of the nation is watching and is watching us closely. And I don't mean they're watching Portlandia. We've accomplished much, but there is much more to do. Governor, the business plan is proud to have you as our senior partner. We're eager to hear more of your plans, and we want to know how we can help support your efforts. Please welcome our governor of the state of Oregon, John Kitzhaber.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. 2 years ago, as John just indicated, our state faced a $3.5 billion revenue shortfall, high unemployment, a divided legislature, and an uncertain future. Furthermore, behind the immediate problem of a multi-billion-dollar deficit was a very disturbing trend. Increasingly, the resources we had were being spent on public safety, on health care, on the human consequences of abuse and neglect and addiction, and less was being spent on children and families and on education, and the trend was accelerating. I stood before you 2 years ago and vowed that my administration would be driven by the need for urgent change, and that I would spend whatever political capital I had to transform outdated institutions, to redesign the delivery of public services, to better meet our goal of rebuilding a strong and secure middle class and ensuring economic opportunity for all Oregonians. Today, I'm proud to report that we have made some great progress. And although we still have a long way to go, the Oregon Business Plan has given us an effective pathway forward. The urgency and the intensity of our effort is born of a very simple premise, that all Oregonians deserve a shot at the American dream. It's a commitment to equity and opportunity. It's a commitment to secure jobs that pay a living wage or provide pathways to a living wage and upward income mobility. It's a commitment to a healthy, functioning natural environment and to safe, secure communities where people have a sense of common purpose and commitment to one another. Even while many of the assumptions we have about work and fairness and upward mobility have been tested by economic hardship and uncertainty, my optimism about a more prosperous future for the state of Oregon remains unshaken. Our great challenge is to end the income stagnation that is eroding the middle class, that exacerbates inequality, and for the first time threatens a generation of Oregonians with the prospect of a lower standard of living. The Oregon Business Plan and this summit represent our commitment to meet that challenge. And this plan is much more than just an economic strategy. It's a roadmap to guide our budget and policy priorities over the next decade. It's a recognition that preparing Oregon for the economy of the 21st century requires all hands on deck. It requires partnerships to rethink both public sector and private sector investment and job creation strategies. It requires the acceleration of the clean innovation economy that's emerging in our state. and it requires the transformation of critical public services, including healthcare and public safety and education. As you know, the Oregon Business Plan is built on three basic pillars. The first one is to create 25,000 jobs a year through 2020. The second is to increase Oregon's personal income back up above the national average by 2020. And the third is to reduce our rate of poverty back to 10% by 2020. Those three pillars are important. They recognize that private sector job creation is the foundation for an enduring prosperity. They also recognize that that prosperity must lift people in every community and every corner of this state, and that if we don't reduce poverty, then not all Oregonians will have a shot at the American dream. This shared vision for the future that is supported by business leaders and labor leaders and legislators of both parties speaks very well for our state and for our commitment and ability to come together and solve problems in stark contrast to many parts of the nation. And we have a lot to show for this effort. We've erased one of the largest per capita budget deficits in the nation with civility, not rancor, with bipartisanship, not gridlock. And we did it by breaking decisively with the past and by making the difficult policy and spending choices that moved us from $3.5 billion in the hole 2 years ago to a balanced budget today. Our prudent fiscal approach earned us an increase in our credit rating from AA to AA+. The Oregon Business Plan estimates that we've created nearly 40,000 jobs. Our unemployment rate has dropped from 10.6 to 8.6. Oregon had the second fastest growing economy in the nation in 2011. We've been ranked by Forbes magazine as one of the top 10 states in the nation to do business. We're ranked #1 for manufacturing and 6th in the nation for entrepreneurship. To encourage new businesses and to encourage the growth of existing businesses, we've increased access to capital. We've built a plan to make our regulatory system the most timely and most results-oriented in the nation, starting with the facilitation of the siting of industrial projects of regional significance. And we've created a network of regional solution centers across the state to break down bureaucratic barriers and accelerate promising community and economic development projects. We stepped up technical assistance and support for our businesses that want access to global markets. I've led 2 trade missions to Asia, and in October of this year, I saw Oregon country beef and Tillamook cheese and Oregon Anjou pears on the shelves of stores in Hong Kong. In Shanghai, a city of 23 million people, we found a growing demand for the kind of green building and clean technologies at which Oregon excels. We opened up new markets for Oregon agricultural products in China and attracted direct foreign investment from Japan. At the same time, with your help, we've made remarkable progress on transforming outdated systems and redesigning the delivery of public services. We've established our educational 40-40-20 North Star. We've begun to align policy and funding and governance across the entire continuum of education. We created the Oregon Education Investment Board and hired our first Chief Education Officer, Rudy Crew, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes. We cut ourselves free from the indiscriminate nets of No Child Left Behind and replaced that with our own tailored system of accountability and improvement for schools. We now have achievement compacts in place with all of our school districts, community colleges, and universities. We've also taken on out-of-control medical costs. We gained flexibility from the federal government and an investment of nearly $2 billion to develop a new care model, starting with the 600,000 people on the Oregon Health Plan. Now, our progress on healthcare reform and on education represent critical steps forward in starting to shift state investments from dealing with problems on the back end to preventing them in the first place. But I also recognize, and I know you share this, that we still have a long way to go. We fell short on our job creation numbers, and many of the jobs we did create actually pay less than the national average. Furthermore, economic recovery has been very uneven. Far too many rural counties and communities of color still face double-digit unemployment. Our poverty rate remains over 17%, and half of the kids born in this state are born onto Medicaid. Still, we're in a much better place than we were 2 years ago, particularly as it pertains to the budget. Because not only did we move from a $3.5 billion deficit to a balanced budget, we've also, with the exception of health care, and I'll return to that in a minute, we've squeezed most of the one-time resources out of the general fund budget. And I can't emphasize how important that is. Since the recession of 2002, our education budget has been patched together with one-time resources, everything from bonding to stimulus dollars. We finally dug our way out of that, which means that this is a sustainable, solid budget, and as our economy grows, we can reinvest resources straight into the classroom and not to backfill one-time resources that had propped up the budget in the past. The budget that I released on Friday is built on high-leverage investments designed to rebuild the middle class and to ensure sustainable economic opportunity for all Oregonians. It's very important that this budget not be viewed as a two-year budget, but rather as the foundation for a 10-year reinvestment strategy. The priorities are to put children and education first, to invest in jobs and innovation, and to reduce the cost of government. This recommended budget delivers on those priorities. Let me start with education and children. Although we've made huge progress, I think, moving towards a more seamless, integrated, accountable system of education from early childhood through college and career, we've not yet had the resources to seriously invest in our 40-40-20 goals. It's clear that the entire enterprise of public education is underfunded at all levels. And it's also clear that we can't meet our 40-40 goals without a significant reinvestment of resources into the classroom. To make that happen, a couple things are required. In the long term, we need comprehensive reform of Oregon's system of public finance. That's going to take time, it's going to take a strategic approach, and it's going to take discipline. But everything in this budget is designed to reverse our pattern of disinvestment and to set the stage for long-term revenue reform. It also means that in the short term, we have to find space within this budget to actually reinvest during the next biennium. That involves reducing the cost of health care and corrections so that we can take those resources and reinvest them on the front end. It means we need to reduce the cost drivers that are diverting resources from the classroom, which involves my proposal to limit the PERS cost of living adjustment to the first $24,000 of income. And finally, it requires a serious review of Oregon's tax expenditures. This budget has $8 billion allocated for education, built on the foundation of early childhood. The budget completes the redesign of our early childhood programs to ensure that all of our children have access to the child care and health care and preschool services to ensure that they're ready to learn when they get to kindergarten. We have a kindergarten assessment that will pilot in 2013 to help us monitor the effectiveness of these investments, and we've increased the investment in early childhood by $48 million in Oregon pre-K, in relief nurseries, and in early intervention and special education. In K through 12, we've appropriated $6.15 billion into the state school fund, which, combined with $253 million in savings from the PERS changes I've recommended, creates a net buying power of $6.4 billion, $90 million above CSL, that would allow us to rehire as many as 500 teachers. This is the first time since 2007 that we've had a K through 12 budget at or above CSL that does not contain any one-time resources, and that is a significant accomplishment. We also have a package of strategic investments in this budget. First, to invest in professional development. It's clear that no state or nation that's ever significantly moved the dial on student performance has done so without a significant investment in the effectiveness of its teaching staff. We've also invested in third grade reading, in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math to better connect young people to the world of work, and investment in counselors and in the ability to earn dual credits to better connect young people with post-secondary education. Now, these strategic investments are a very important part of the strategy to move to a conversation about long-term revenue reform. It's my belief that if we take a small part of our education budget and invest it in things that don't just sustain but actually transform the system, we can show that increased dollars equate to increased results. And that is a key element of changing the conversation with Oregonians about the need to reinvest in our schools. We have to convince them, one, that new dollars are actually going into the classroom, and two, that those dollars are actually going to produce better results for students. I'm also committed to expanding access to quality, affordable post-secondary education. We increased funding for community colleges and the university system, 7 to 8%, which should be viewed as a down payment on this long-term reinvestment strategy and hopefully will help hold tuition in check. I've increased Oregon Opportunity Grants by 14% and expanded dual credit programs so high school students can accrue college credits. I also support tuition equity to ensure that every qualified Oregon high school student, regardless of immigration status, has access to affordable post-secondary education in our state. The budget also includes $275 million for capital construction projects on community colleges and university campuses. Now let me take just a moment and talk about the strategies I've used to try to open up a window for these reinvestments in the 2013-15 biennium. First is healthcare. Healthcare is the one place we still have a lot of one-time money because of the huge amount of stimulus dollars that were put into that program. So I've recommended that we extend the hospital provider tax for 2 more years to fully fund the health plan at the agreement we reached with the federal government, which means funding the first year at a 4.4% inflation rate, which is lower than we have right now, and the second year at a 3.4% inflation rate. That will save total funds $11 billion over the decade. It frees up $100 million in this biennium. In the next biennium, it frees up almost $200 million. In the 2017-19 biennium, it frees up $400 million. So the delta of available resources by holding Medicaid growth to 3.4% creates hundreds of millions of dollars in this decade that we can reinvest in public education. Secondly is public safety. Our prison forecast suggests that we'll have to build 2,300 beds over the next decade at a cost of $600 million. Most of those beds will be occupied by nonviolent offenders. And so my budget proposes holding the Department of Corrections bed population steady at 14,600 and finding alternative ways to sanction nonviolent offenders while still keeping Oregonians safe by looking at the recommendations of the Public Safety Commission and investing $40 million in this budget in community corrections and prevention on the front end. Finally, we need to address the cost drivers that are diverting dollars from the classroom. As you know, the cost to school districts is expected to go up by $1,000 per student in the upcoming biennium. $500 of that is the PERS increase alone. $300 represents salary, $130 represents other benefits, leaving very little to reinvest at a time we desperately need to put money back into the classroom. And for this huge increase in cost, nearly $600 million system-wide, we won't lower average class size, we won't restore school days, and we won't be able to add back electives like arts or vocational training. So when I say put children in education first, I mean just that. I mean that the first use of new resources should be directed to student success. That's an important principle, but it's not one that has always guided our budgets in the past. Until now, most of our budgets have taken a cost-plus approach to funding education. From now on, I want to take a kids-first approach. A kids-first approach starts by asking a very simple question. If we're going to add $1,000 in cost to our system of public education, what is the best use of those funds to improve teaching and learning and ensure student success? I would argue that the best use of those funds is to hire more teachers, to reduce class size, to add back lost school days, to hire counselors, to invest in professional development and add back electives. Now, I firmly believe that it's very, very important to maintain a strong, stable retirement system for public employees, to pay good wages and benefits to teachers and school employees, but we can't ignore the fact that the cost of PERS alone is adding $300 million to the system. Teachers and classified school employees are absolutely crucial. They are the center point in improving student success, and they deserve competitive salaries and benefits that increase in line with pay and benefit gains by Oregonians working across the state. So let me make this very, very clear. This is not about the value of our teachers. It is not about the value of our public employees. It is also not about a major overhaul of a retirement system that continues to be one of the best funded in the nation. It is simply about trying to have a conversation that allows us to strike a balance between the cost of our retirement system and our ability to put dollars in the classroom today to ensure that our students are successful tomorrow. This budget also invests heavily in jobs and innovation, which directly addresses the immediate challenge of creating new jobs, but also to position Oregon better for economic success in the 21st century. The budget contains $1 billion in suggested infrastructure projects funded with lottery and general obligation bonds. We've expanded Connect Oregon. We've added, as I mentioned, $270 million for capital construction and post-secondary education, including the OSU Cascade campus in Bend. It includes seismic upgrades, air, marine, and rail improvements, technology infrastructure improvements. This budget also has $450 million in other bonding capacity for Oregon's share of the CRC funding. After a decade of planning After a year of legislative review, it's time to get this project off the ground. Last week, I met with the bipartisan legislative leadership of the House and Senate. We all agreed that the I-5 bridge replacement project is a critical state project that needs to move forward. And we received their commitment that we would prioritize this work in 2013, resolve any remaining issues, and find the funding necessary to service these bonds. I emphasize that it's important to get this done by March 1st to give the Washington legislature time to act as well. I've spoken with Governor Gregoire, I've spoken with Governor-elect Inslee, and they plan to advance an I-5 bridge funding package in the Washington legislature next year. It's time that we build this bridge. We've also followed through on the commitment to support locally driven economic development priorities. This would include work to expand the effort in Eastern Oregon to expand irrigated agriculture from water from the Columbia and Umatilla while improving and enhancing fish runs, support for scaling up the East Side Forest Collaboratives to put people back to work in forest restoration, and continuing some of the funding capacity in our work to try to resolve the ONC issue in Southwest Oregon. I've also doubled down on proven public-private partnerships like Oregon Inc. I've increased that budget to $25 million. As you know, it supports our 3 signature research centers and also university-based research dedicated to innovation in agriculture and in forest research. These partnerships support Oregon's emerging clean innovation economy. It's an economy that's rooted in our strengths, our strong base in agriculture and forestry and advanced manufacturing industries, promising technology, research and development and commercialization opportunities, and our strategic location on the Pacific Rim with access to the growing Asian markets. Oregon Inc. alone has created 26 new companies just in the past 5 years, everything from the next generation of water purification systems to portable renal dialysis machines. And it has attracted hundreds of millions of dollars of private capital and federal grants, and has given us a tremendously high return on investment for a very modest investment of state funds. The budget also has $5 million in seed money for the Oregon Investment Act, 3 FTE to begin to move our regulatory program out to the regional solution centers as the first step in implementing our strategy for regulatory streamlining, and $10 million to redesign Oregon's workforce system to make it more effective for the challenges of the 21st century. Finally, but very, very importantly, this budget supports the Oregon Business Plan commitment to drive per capita income back up above the national average by 2020 and to reduce our poverty rate. That requires that working families keep more of what they earn and have the opportunity to actually move up the income ladder. Towards that end, I've expanded the employment-related daycare program and increased the earned income tax credit by more than 30%. Both are proven programs that help deliver on our commitment to move more Oregon families from poverty to prosperity, and these are key elements of the Oregon Prosperity Initiative that's being led by the First Lady. I want Patty Whitney Wise, I see you out there. Let me close my comments this morning with one observation and with a brief story. The observation is about the Oregon Business Plan. You know, it's really quite extraordinary and I think unique in this country to have a forum like this where we can get together and deal with some pretty complex areas and talk about how our state can thrive. A year ago, I sat around the table in the White House with the president and with 40 CEOs and mayors and governors from around the country discussing how we can bring manufacturing back to the United States. And noting that Oregon had one of the fastest growing economies in the state, President Obama asked me what was our secret. And I said that we had a unified business plan to build our economy and to develop jobs. And it was a business plan that recognized the importance of education and the importance of reducing the cost of health care and public safety in order to be successful. But most importantly, it was a plan that we were executing and implementing. Now, in spite of the progress we've made in the last 2 years, there are still voices in our state that are complaining that we haven't invested enough in education in this budget, that we haven't invested enough in human resources or in job creation. There are voices that are concerned about the difficult choices that are entailed in making these investments. Choices about public safety and about PERS and about tax expenditures. Choices about the provider tax. But to those people who raise those questions, and to those of you in this room, and to people throughout our state, I want to leave you with this story. It's a story that I think offers perspective on how far we've come, but also on how far we still have to go. It's a story that hopefully will inspire and motivate us over the years to come. Last Monday in Coos Bay at the annual government-to-government summit between the state of Oregon and our 9 federally recognized tribes, a woman from the Burns Paiute tribe got up to speak. I believe her name was Diane Tiemann. Burns Paiute is a poor tribe in some respects. They don't have the wealth of the Grand Ronde. They don't have the land base of the Warm Springs, but they have something else. And she told me a story of her grandmother after the Bannock War of 1878, who was marched to Fort Boise and then marched to a reservation in Yakima, from which she escaped as a preteen with another girl. They swam the Columbia River, and they made their way back to Burns without resources and without land. And Diane said that when she looks out at the other tribes that are better off than the Burns Paiute, she's not envious. She remembers her grandmother and thinks, look how far we've come. It was a long, hard path from December 2010 to here, and the road stretches on out before us. But let's commit ourselves when we leave this place, to recommit ourselves to our partnership and to our vision, so 2 years from now, when we come together, we can once again say, look how far we've come. Thank you very much.
We want to thank the governor for joining us and particularly providing the leadership for our state in these areas. We appreciate the fact that his priorities and our priorities at the business plan are very well aligned, and want to let him know that we're committed to help make him succeed on these priorities. We continue to offer our help and support in the tough job he has ahead of us in the coming months, and thank him again for being with us. So I want to, before we take our lunch break, I want to thank so many people that made this event possible. And you'll see some slides that have the names of the individuals. First, our leadership team. Next, our steering committee. All the volunteers who helped organize the breakout session. Speakers who took their time out of the day to share their wisdom and experience with us are listed in your agenda. And then the sponsors. Sponsor slide will appear momentarily. There we go, staff and the consultants. So, thank you, everyone. We have, over lunch, about half the tables in the room are set up and being hosted by leaders of the key Oregon industry sectors. They have signs on the tables. We encourage you to sit with the people who are leading the conversation at these tables. They are supporting the Oregon Industry Cluster Network. And as you know, Business Oregon, the Governor's Office, Oregon State University, the Oregon Cluster Network, all have been recognized by Harvard University as a national leader in promoting industry clusters for economic development.